Imagine stepping outside to find your neighbor dumping a bag of garbage right into your disabled daughter's wheelchair. What would you do? Because when it happened to me, I realized some people are just begging for a lesson in the law. It was a crisp spring Saturday in our suburban slice of Texas. I'm Mike, 54, a guy who spends his days making sure federal agencies don't step on the wrong side of the law. My daughter, Lily, 10, was out front in her pink wheelchair, flower sticker on the side, pure Lily flair, scribbling chalk masterpieces on the sidewalk. Butterflies, rainbows, the works. Her art supplies, chalk, markers, a sketchbook, were tucked neatly in the basket on her chair. Me. I was wrestling a fence board, toolbox sprawled on the grass, my phone propped on the porch rail, screen up, probably still open to a DIY YouTube video. Then comes Karen. Early 50s, HOA president, always strutting around with her Pomeranian, Muffin, on one of those annoying retractable leashes. She's got her sunglasses perched on her head and a clipboard that might as well be glued to her hand. She storms down the sidewalk, eyeing Lily's drawings like they're a federal crime scene. I catch her muttering something about standards and property values. Classic Karen. She stops dead in front of Lily, plants her hands on her hips, and starts yapping. This is defacing common property, she snaps, pointing at the chalk butterflies. It's graffiti. Against HOA rules. Lily, sweet kid, tries to explain it's just chalk, washes off with rain, but Karen's not having it. She cuts her off, voice sharp enough to slice through a brisket. Now, I'm half a second from telling Karen to take a hike when she escalates from annoying to straight up unhinged. She marches 3 doors down to her own trash can, yanks out a white kitchen garbage bag, reeking of last night's tacos, no doubt, and storms back. Before I can blink, she dumps the whole stinking mess right into Lily's wheelchair basket. Markers, sketchbook, wheelchair seat, all ruined under a pile of Karen's refuse. I drop my hammer, probably denting the driveway, and charge over. What the hell is wrong with you? I demand, trying to keep my cool while fishing coffee grounds out of Lily's basket. Karen doesn't even flinch. If your kid can't keep her junk off the sidewalk, she says, tossing her hair, maybe she shouldn't be out here. Muffin yaps like he's backing her up. Across the street, Mrs. Jenkins, our elderly neighbor, is frozen on her porch, jaw dropped, clutching her iced tea. No help there, she's too shocked to move. Karen, meanwhile, waves her clipboard like it's a scepter. I'm fining you for sidewalk clutter and improper storage of personal items, she declares, like she's Judge Judy of suburbia. I'm seeing red, but I'm not about to lose it in front of Lily. Instead, I whip out my phone and start snapping photos, trash in the wheelchair, ruined art supplies, Karen's smug face in the background. You crossed a line, I tell her, voice low. She just smirks, like she's untouchable. If you've ever had a neighbor turn an HOA rulebook into a weapon, or just act like a world-class jerk, you know this vibe. Drop your story in the comments, I know I'm not the only one dealing with these backyard despots. As I will Lily inside, trying to calm her down, Karen's got the nerve to snap a photo of our house with her phone. This isn't over, she mutters, stomping off with Muffin in tow. Oh, Karen, you have no idea who you're messing with. You'd think after dumping trash on a disabled kid, Karen would slink back to her lair and lay low. Nope, she doubled down, like a gambler betting the house on a busted flush. That afternoon, I was in the garage, scrubbing the last of Karen's taco-scented garbage out of Lily's pink wheelchair. The thing was drying by the workbench, looking a little sadder for wear. Lily was rolling around in her backup chair, blue, squeaky as a bad hinge, trying to stay cheerful despite her ruined art supplies, now bagged up on a shelf like evidence from a crime scene. My toolbox still sat by the fence, mocking my unfinished repair job. I was already plotting my next move when Karen decided to crank the crazy up to 11. A yellow envelope slid under our front door with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. I opened it to find a formal HOA violation letter, typed up in Karen's signature Comic Sans, accusing us of unsightly debris and sidewalk obstruction. The woman had the gall to cite Lily's chalk art and her wheelchair as the problem. I caught a glimpse of her outside, snapping a photo of our mailbox like some low-rent private eye, muffin yapping at her heels. I scanned the letter, added it to a new laptop folder labeled Karen Evidence, and jotted down the day's timeline in my notebook. If Karen wanted a paper trail, I'd give her one thicker than a tax code. By evening, Karen was on a full-blown crusade. She hit the neighborhood like a one-woman propaganda machine, knocking on doors and spinning a tale about how our family was attracting pests and tanking property values. I got wind of it when I checked the neighborhood Facebook group. Big mistake. There was Karen, posting a photo of Lily's chalk butterflies and, worse, the trash-strewn wheelchair, captioned as evidence of a pattern of neglect. She'd conveniently cropped out her own starring role in the garbage-dumping saga. The comments were a mixed bag. A few Karens in training nodded along, but most folks seemed too stunned to pile on. The neighborhood vibe shifted fast. At the mailbox the next morning, a couple of neighbors gave me the side-eye, like I'd been secretly running a landfill out of my garage. But not everyone bought Karen's nonsense. Mrs. Jenkins, bless her, slipped a note under our door, sorry about what happened. That woman is out of control. It was written on floral stationery, smelled faintly of lavender, and gave me a flicker of hope that not everyone had lost their damn minds. I wasn't about to let Karen's smear campaign slide. I printed out screenshots of her Facebook posts, every pixel of her lies preserved for posterity, and tossed them into my evidence folder. Then I cracked open the HOA bylaws, dry as a West Texas summer but pure gold for a guy like me. I highlighted sections on reasonable accommodation and disability rights, circling a clause about harassment that had Karen's name written all over it. She thought she was the queen of this cul-de-sac, but I was about to introduce her to checkmate. By Monday, I was in full legal mode. I fired off an email to a disability rights attorney I'd worked with on a federal case years back. Attached were the photos of the trash-covered wheelchair, the HOA letter, and Karen's Facebook drivel. I laid out the whole story, calm and professional, like I was writing a compliance report. Next, I drafted a formal complaint to the HOA board, citing violations of the ADA and Fair Housing Act. I didn't just want Karen's wrist slapped, I wanted her to feel the full weight of the law she'd been dodging. Karen, of course, wasn't done. Tuesday morning, I found another note taped to our porch railing, this one threatening daily fines if debris showed up again. I caught her later that day, skulking across the street, snapping photos of Lily's blue wheelchair from her driveway. She was building her own case, or so she thought, but every move she made was just another nail in her coffin. I added the note to my folder and updated my timeline, my pen practically smoking from how fast I was writing. The neighborhood was starting to feel like a Cold War zone, Karen's propaganda on one side, my quiet counteroffensive on the other. A few neighbors stopped by to check on Lily, their awkward small talk screaming guilt for not speaking up sooner. I didn't hold it against them, Karen's clipboard had a way of intimidating folks into silence. But Mrs. Jenkins was my MVP, whispering intel about Karen's latest rants over the fence like a suburban spy. She's calling a special HOA meeting, she told me, her eyes gleaming with something between fear and excitement. Says she's gonna deal with the problem family once and for all. I almost laughed. Karen thought she was holding all the cards, but she didn't know I'd been playing this game for decades. My evidence folder was thicker than her ego, and my attorney was already drafting a letter that'd make the HOA board sweat through their khakis. Let her call her little meeting. I'd be there, with Lily by my side, ready to turn her crusade into a cautionary tale. Karen thought she was running the show, strutting into that HOA meeting like she was about to drop the gavel on our family. She didn't know she'd just poked a legal hornet's nest, and I was ready to let it swarm. Thursday evening, the community clubhouse was packed with neighbors, some curious, some just there for the free coffee. Karen sat at the head table, clipboard in hand, muffin curled up in her lap like a furry little henchman. I rolled in with Lily in her squeaky blue wheelchair, clutching a folder thick enough to choke a lawyer. Inside, photos of the trash-strewn wheelchair, Karen's violation letters, Facebook screenshots, a clear bag with Lily's ruined art supplies, and a USB drive with doorbell cam footage of Karen's garbage dumping stunt. I wasn't here to play nice, I was here to bury her in evidence. Karen kicked things off with her usual flair, waving her clipboard like it was the Constitution itself. She read her violation letter aloud, voice dripping with fake concern, claiming our mess was a health hazard and lowering property values. She'd blown up photos of Lily's chalk art and the trash-filled wheelchair, passing them around like crime scene Polaroids. Never mind that she was the one who turned Lily's chair into a landfill. The room was quiet, a few neighbors nodding along, others shifting uncomfortably in their folding chairs. I let her finish her little performance, then stood up, calm as a summer morning. "Mind if I respond?" I asked, voice steady. The board president, a nervous guy with a comb-over, nodded. I opened my folder and started laying out the evidence, piece by damning piece. First, the photos of the trash in Lily's wheelchair, time-stamped and crystal clear. Then the doorbell cam footage, projected on the clubhouse screen, showing Karen marching up with her garbage bag and dumping it like she was spiking a football. A few gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Jenkins, front row, gave a satisfied nod. I handed out copies of Karen's Facebook posts, her own words accusing us of neglect, while conveniently omitting her starring role. Then I read from the HOA bylaws, highlighting the section on harassment and another on reasonable accommodation for disabilities. I followed it up with a crash course on the ADA and Fair Housing Act, quoting sections that made it clear Karen's actions weren't just mean, they were illegal. "This isn't about chalk," I said, holding up Lily's ruined sketchbook. "This is about targeting a disabled child and thinking you can get away with it." The room was dead silent now, Karen's smug grin fading faster than her spray tan. Two neighbors stepped up to back me. Mrs. Jenkins, voice quaking but firm, recounted seeing Karen dump the trash, calling it the cruelest thing I've ever seen. Another neighbor, a quiet guy who usually kept to himself, admitted Karen had pressured him to sign a petition against us. "I didn't," he said, glancing at Lily. "It didn't feel right." The HOA lawyer, patched in via Zoom, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. He asked to see my evidence, and I slid the folder across the table, every photo, every letter, every screenshot. The board members were exchanging glances, their faces screaming, "We're in deep trouble." Karen tried to interrupt, waving her clipboard and yammering about procedure, but the president cut her off. "Sit down, Karen," he said, and the room held its breath. Muffin whimpered. "I saved my trump card for last. I've spent 20 years as a federal legal compliance officer," I said, letting that sink in. "My specialty? Disability rights." I pulled out a letter from my attorney, addressed to the board, warning of potential state and federal lawsuits if the HOA didn't address Karen's violations. I handed it over, watching the president's comb-over practically wilt. "I'm not here to make threats," I said. "I'm here to protect my daughter. But I know the law, and I'm not afraid to use it." Karen's face was a mix of panic and fury, her sunglasses slipping down her nose. She tried to sputter something about misunderstandings, but the board wasn't buying it. The lawyer on Zoom started muttering about liability and urgent review. The president, now sweating through his polo, announced they'd need an emergency session to go through the evidence. "All fines against your family are suspended, effective immediately," he said, looking at me. A few neighbors clapped, and Mrs. Jenkins gave Lily a thumbs up. As the meeting broke up, Karen stormed out, muffin tucked under her arm like a football. I heard her muttering about unfair treatment as she disappeared into the parking lot. Neighbors started approaching, some apologizing, others just wanting to shake my hand. Lily, rolling beside me, whispered, "Did we win, Dad?" I smiled. "Not yet, kiddo, but we're getting there." Back home, I added notes from the meeting to my Karen evidence folder, my pen moving like it had a personal vendetta. The board's emergency session was set for tomorrow, and I had a feeling Karen's reign was about to take a serious hit. I'd spent years dealing with bureaucrats and bullies. Karen was just another name on the list. Karen always wanted to run the neighborhood like her own private fiefdom. Now she was running out of allies, and her throne was looking shakier than a lawn chair in a hurricane. The next day, the HOA board huddled in their boardroom, probably wishing they'd never met Karen's clipboard. My evidence folder, photos, letters, screenshots, and that damning doorbell cam footage, was now in their hands, along with a repair bill for Lily's pink wheelchair, freshly back from the shop and gleaming in our garage. I'd submitted the bill for reimbursement, figuring Karen's stunt should come with a price tag. By noon, the board had been hit with a 1-2 punch, a letter from the state attorney general's office and a notice from the Department of Justice, both sparked by my complaint. Karen's little trash dumping tantrum had just gone federal. The board didn't waste time. By evening, they'd suspended Karen from her role as HOA president, pending a full investigation. They posted a public apology to our family on the neighborhood Facebook group, where Karen's own smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. A letter went out to every resident, admitting the HOA's oversight in letting her run amok. I printed both and added them to my Karen evidence folder, just in case she tried to rewrite history later. Karen's meltdown was the stuff of legend. Neighbors who'd been at the board meeting said she stormed out, slamming her clipboard into the trash can outside the clubhouse so hard it cracked. Muffin, caught in the chaos, yapped like he was auditioning for a dog whistle commercial. By the time she peeled out of the parking lot, her sunglasses were nowhere to be seen, and her reign was officially on life support. The neighborhood's mood shifted overnight. Folks who'd avoided me at the mailbox suddenly wanted to chat. A few stopped by with apologies, their faces redder than a summer sunburn. Mrs. Jenkins, my unofficial spy, brought Lily a new set of chalks, wrapped in a ribbon like it was Christmas. "For the butterflies," she said, winking. Another neighbor, the quiet guy from the meeting, dropped off a plate of cookies and a note saying he'd always thought Karen was a bit much. Understatement of the year. The board wasn't done cleaning up Karen's mess. They called an emergency meeting to amend the HOA bylaws, adding explicit protections for residents with disabilities. No more wiggle room for clipboard tyrants to target kids like Lily. They also slapped Karen with a fine for harassment, ironic, considering her love of fining others, and banned her from holding any HOA office for 5 years. I heard the vote was unanimous, with the lawyer on Zoom practically begging them to make it permanent. I didn't gloat, but I'll admit to a quiet smirk when I read the official notice. Karen's house of cards wasn't just collapsing, it was being shredded. The Facebook group lit up with neighbors venting years of pent-up frustration about her reign of terror. One guy posted about how she'd fined him for a non-compliant mailbox that was literally HOA approved. Another shared a story of her measuring his grass with a ruler at 7 a.m. The comments were a mix of outrage and relief, with a few memes of clipboards and Pomeranians for good measure. I stayed out of it, my work was done, and I'd rather let Karen stew in her own digital dumpster fire. At home, things were looking up. Lily was back in her pink wheelchair, the repair bill now the HOA's problem. She rolled around the driveway, sketching new butterflies with Mrs. Jenkins' chalks, her smile brighter than ever. I kept my phone handy, recording a few clips of her art for the community newsletter, which had reached out about featuring her work. The Karen Evidence folder sat on my laptop, a reminder that documentation beats drama every time. Neighbors kept swinging by, their guilt morphing into support. A couple of kids from down the street joined Lily to draw on the sidewalk, turning it into a rainbow explosion of chalk. One mom brought over a card for Lily, signed by half the block. It wasn't just about the trash incident anymore, it was about a community waking up to what Karen's bullying had cost them. I didn't need their cookies or cards, but seeing Lily laugh with her new art crew. That was worth more than any legal win. Karen, meanwhile, was unraveling. She was barely seen outside, her usual power walks replaced by her husband trudging around with Muffin. Word was she'd hired a lawyer, probably some strip mall hack who'd take one look at my evidence and start sweating. I wasn't worried. My attorney's letter was still making waves, and the DOJ notice wasn't going anywhere. Karen could lawyer up all she wanted, she'd picked a fight with the wrong dad. Then came the cherry on top, an email from the HOA board, inviting me to join a new accessibility committee to ensure the neighborhood stayed inclusive. I hadn't asked for the gig, but I wasn't about to say no. If I could turn Karen's mess into something good for Lily and others, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Plus, I'd heard a rumor that Karen's house had quietly gone up for sale. No "for sale" sign yet, but the realtor's car parked in her driveway was all the confirmation I needed. Revenge is best served with a side of federal paperwork, and a little neighborhood fame. Karen's downfall was complete, and I was ready to savor the quiet that followed her storm. A few weeks later, our front yard was alive again. Lily, back in her freshly cleaned pink wheelchair, was sketching butterflies on the sidewalk, her new chalk set from Mrs. Jenkins tucked in the basket. The colors popped against the concrete, blues, pinks, a splash of yellow that screamed defiance. I leaned against the porch, phone in hand, recording her work for a community newsletter feature. A Karen Repellent Zone sign, a gag gift from Mrs. Jenkins, stood proudly on our lawn, its glittery letters catching the sun. Every time I glanced at it, I couldn't help but grin. The HOA had finally gotten its act together. The board circulated new guidelines on disability rights and reasonable accommodation, printed on crisp letterhead and mailed to every house. No more vague rules for bullies like Karen to twist. I'd been named chair of the Accessibility Committee, a role I took on with a mix of pride and pragmatism. If I could make the neighborhood safer for Lily and others, I'd do it, even if it meant sitting through meetings with the comb-over president. The first agenda item: sidewalk ramps at every corner. Karen would have had a stroke. Karen herself was a ghost now. Her house was officially on the market, a discreet "for sale" sign finally up by the mailbox. The realtor's car was a regular fixture, but Karen was rarely spotted. Her husband shuffled around with Muffin, looking like a man who'd aged a decade in a month. The neighborhood gossip mill churned. Some said she was moving to a condo downtown, others swore she was headed to a gated community where she could terrorize a fresh batch of victims. Either way, her reign was over, and the block felt lighter without her clipboard looming. The community had rallied in a way I hadn't expected. Neighbors stopped by with cookies, cards, even a handmade bracelet for Lily from a kid down the street. The newsletter ran a full-page spread on her art, titled "Inclusivity and Kindness, Lily's Butterflies." Her chalk drawings were the talk of the block, with kids and even a few adults joining her to turn the sidewalk into a kaleidoscope. One morning, I caught the quiet guy from the HOA meeting sketching a lopsided dragon next to Lily's work. "She's got talent," he said, dusting chalk off his jeans. I nodded, my throat a little tight. Mrs. Jenkins was the unofficial cheerleader, dropping by with iced tea and stories of Karen's past antics. "Did you know she once fined me for a birdhouse?" she said, cackling. "Said it was too colorful. That woman was a menace. She'd taken to calling our yard Butterfly Central, and I wasn't about to argue." The support wasn't just for Lily, it was like the neighborhood was apologizing for letting Karen's nonsense slide for so long. I didn't need their guilt, but I'd take their kindness any day. I couldn't resist a bit of satire in the aftermath. Over beers with a neighbor, I joked about installing a Karen early warning system, motion sensors that'd blare an air horn if a clipboard got too close. I even tossed out some tongue-in-cheek tips for dealing with HOA tyrants: document everything, know your rights, and never underestimate a dad with a legal background. The guy laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. I was half serious, though. My Karen evidence folder was still on my laptop, a digital trophy of a battle well fought. The legal side was wrapping up nicely. The HOA had reimbursed the wheelchair repair bill, and my attorney confirmed the DOJ and state AG were keeping tabs on the board to ensure compliance. Karen's harassment fine was paid, though I heard she tried to fight it and lost. Her 5-year ban from HOA office was ironclad, and the bylaws now had enough disability protections to make a civil rights lawyer proud. I didn't hear from Karen's lawyer again. Guess he took one look at my evidence and advised her to cut her losses. Lily was the real winner. Her confidence was back, her wheelchair basket overflowing with new art supplies. She'd started teaching the neighbor kids how to blend chalk colors, turning our driveway into an impromptu art school. Watching her laugh, I felt like we'd done more than just beat Karen, we'd reclaimed our little corner of the world. The Karen Repellent Zone sign might have been a joke, but it stood for something real. Nobody was messing with my kid again. As I watched Lily draw, I thought about how fast things had turned. A month ago, Karen was dumping trash and threatening fines. Now, her house was for sale, and our sidewalk was a gallery. Justice didn't always come this clean, but when it did, it felt like a cold beer on a hot day. I'd keep chairing the accessibility committee, making sure the HOA stayed on the right side of the law. And if another Karen popped up, I'd be ready with my phone, my folder, and a whole lot of federal know-how. If you enjoyed seeing an HOA bully get what's coming, hit like, share your own Karen stories in the comments, subscribe, and ring that bell. Because you never know when the next neighborhood villain will strike, and I'll be here, ready to document their downfall.